Hello, Falava, and welcome back to Behind the Lava podcast. I'm Spencer. I'll be your host for today. We're so happy to get back into the swing of things for the new year. I hope everybody's having fun cheering on their cousins and their uncles in the playoffs right now. As always, Behind the Lava is brought to you by Matai Watches. You can celebrate your heritage and style. Order yours at behindthelavalava.com. Today, we're continuing our run into 2023, and we're doing so with a very prestigious guest. Now, if you want to talk about a strong start to the new year, this is it. Like, if we ever have a goal of, ending things at a high note, this may as well be our last episode, because I don't know if we'll ever top this guest right now. And so in the Polynesian community, this man is combat sports royalty. This man has pro fights in boxing, mixed martial arts, Muay Thai, and of course, kickboxing. He has wins over greats such as Jerome Lebanner, Mike Bernardo, and the legendary Mark Hunt. He's trained with many fighters affiliated with the Extreme Couture Gym or in Fight Camp in Las Vegas, and is currently the president of the Professional Fight League. I caught myself there. I almost said the World Series of Fighting. So, but ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I just wanted to introduce you to Ray Sugarfoot Sefo. So welcome, Ray. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Now, before we kick it to you to give you any introduction that you'd like to plug for yourself, I'd like to start off with a bit of an icebreaker question. Just right off the top of your head, whose face felt the best at the end of your fist?
That's a good question. There's one that comes to mind. I don't want to call him out, but there was a guy, I actually, go to shake his hand. This is like 2 days before the fight, and my team and I the fight was in Tokyo, and so my team and I were going to breakfast. They were walking out and we were walking in, and so I went to shake his hand, just say, hey, listen, good luck, as I do to all my opponents. I'm not the type of guy, I'm not the type of fighter that it's, when it's business, right? But at the same time, I'm also the type of guy that won't take any BS. And so I go to shake his hand. He just looked at me and kind of went like this and walked away. I was like, all right. Needless to say, I think about 40 seconds through the fight, I knocked him out cold. And so that's probably the one that answers that question.
I'm going to have to scrub through your fight library to find, who you knocked out in 48 seconds. I'll find that, though. So thank you very much. So what we'd like to do here is, we're going to go over, and obviously you've been around. You're a well-known person, well-known athlete, well-known promoter. But if by chance any of our audience is not familiar with you, we want to try to get at a few things. We want to know Ray Sefo, the fighter, Ray Sefo, the promoter, but also Ray Sefo, the person. So on that note, we'd like to throw it back. If we could just go back to the beginning, we'd like to know, how did you get your start? Where do you come from? What's your home like? What was your upbringing like?
My upbringing was a typical Polynesian, typical Samoan upbringing. My mother was the tough, she was she held the iron fist at the house, you know what I mean? And as most Samoan mothers are. But anyway, I grew up in Auckland, New Zealand. A very simple life. My parents both worked, a 9-to-5 job to put food on the table and whatnot. Made it through high school, spent a couple of years in college and realized that's not really where I wanted to go. But I mean, go back to about when I was 5, my dad, because I come from a boxing background. My dad used to be a boxer. My grandfather, my cousins, uncles, everybody boxed. Not only within New Zealand, but also within the island, Samoa, that is. And at the age of 7, I believe, 7, my dad had rented a Bruce Lee movie and a Jackie Chan movie. And both of those movies one was Drunken Master and the other one was Fist of Fury. And I was like, Dad, I want to do that. You know what I mean? I was just so fascinated by because I had never seen anything like this before. And so there was, jumping, flying kicks and you name it. I mean, obviously, later on in time you go, yeah, okay, I understand. Yeah, this is all part of the movie and whatnot. But anyhow, so I was so fascinated by martial arts, and by the time I was 12, a friend of mine was doing Wing Chun Kung Fu. And so I joined the club that he was with. And I did Wing Chun for about 6 years. But I realized every time I got into a street fight, I was fighting like a kickboxer. And so I was trying to, figure out exactly what I wanted to do. And so I ended up going to another friend of mine who was doing Muay Thai at the time. And I did that. Now, Wing Chun is amazing, but for some reason, I just found the art of Muay Thai kickboxing more suitable to me. And so I trained, I want to say I was doing Muay Thai for probably about 4 months. And I get challenged to a fight so we go to a weigh-in. A few of our teammates were getting ready to fight, and one of our teammates actually was diagnosed with asthma, if you will, and so he was told that he couldn't fight that day, and his opponent actually challenged me to a fight, and I wasn't, obviously I wasn't ready, but my mind, like, I never wanted to be a fighter. Funny enough, all I wanted to do when I was a kid was I wanted to be a cop, because in New Zealand at the time, one of my favorite TV shows at the time was a program called Chips, which was an American TV show. And I was like, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And so, at a young age, that's what I wanted to do, or eventually do. But at a young age of, I was 18. And when I got challenged in this fight, my mind was saying no, but the typical Samoan heart was like, yeah, all right, mother effer, let's go. And that's kind of like how it all started, you know what I mean? And so in some ways I have him to thank, because I truly know today at 51 years old, understanding that was the path. And I thank God every day that, my whole life has been blessed, because I felt like throughout my life, I felt like I've been directed, I've been corrected, I've been, just the whole flow of things, you know what I mean? And so, the fight was set. I think 3 months later, I ended up fighting this guy. I dropped him in the first round, went on to win the fight. And I love that feeling of, when you get into a street fight, there's no feeling of achievement. It's like, it's about you defending yourself, or self-defense and whatnot. But in the ring and the cage, there's this special feeling of achievement, if you will, because there's people that are rooting you on, or are supporting you and whatnot. And so it's almost, it was that feeling of a individual achievement with your team, but also fulfilling the supporters or your fans, what they are there for, and to watch entertainment and to watch you compete. So yeah, it's kind of like, so I kind of loved that, like that feeling, and then it became an adrenaline rush, if you will, and it just kind of continued from there. And so I took one fight after another. After my third amateur fight, I fought the number one contender, beat him. So then I was up to fight for the national amateur title, won that, turned pro, and the rest is history. I kind of just, and that was pretty much the road that was there for me. And I started winning national titles. I started challenging for South Pacific titles and whatnot. And then my first world title fight came in '92, which was in Guangzhou, China. And it was in front of 50,000 people, which was absolutely mind-blowing for me, because I was used to fighting in front of 5,000 people, 2,000 people, you know what I mean? And then suddenly I'm in front of this massive crowd and won that world title, which was the light heavyweight world title. And then I just continued from there. Went from light heavy to light cruiser to cruiserweight, super cruiser, heavyweight, and super heavyweight. And so I captured 6 world titles throughout my career. Of course, the biggest highlight of that was I won my 6th world title in K1. And for those who don't know what K1 was like the biggest kickboxing organization in the world. And you had to be a world champion to be invited to K1. So after I beat Andre Menard for the Super Cruiserweight World title, it was the ISKA Super Cruiserweight World title. And Andre was from Holland. And, and the Dutch fighters are some of the best in the world in kickboxing. And after I beat him, it was that was the opening that allowed me to get to K1, unbeknownst to me at that time, because at the time I was also modeling and doing part-time acting, like very, very small roles here and there. And I had auditioned for a TV show kind of similar to ER, if you will, and it was called Shortland Street Back Home. And when you get a second call, you're in. And so I get a second call on a Wednesday, I believe. No, on a Monday. And my agent's like, hey, listen, they want you back for fitting and blah, blah, blah. Come Friday, when I was supposed to go in for fitting, I get an early phone call from my agent that they've decided to go with somebody else. And I'm like, okay, it is what it is. That's the nature of the business. It can change overnight. You know what I mean? And so this happened on a Friday. Monday, I get a phone call from Japan, and they were literally saying for me to get over there as fast as I can. And I was like, what? Because I had watched K1 for a couple of years and admired people like Peter Hurd, Janista Hughes, Jerome LeBanner, Mike Bernardo, and so on, and Andy Hogue. So there's so many fighters that I watched throughout this last few years. And I was like, one day I'm going to be there. And that was just my own personal saying to myself. And, as they say, if you put it out in this universe, it'll come back. And that's exactly what happened. So I'm no longer part of this TV show on Friday. I didn't get the part. And then on Monday, I get a phone call saying that they wanted to see me in Japan. And it was just meant to be. And again, when I say I thank the good Lord every day, is I truly thank the good Lord every day, because my path that I always kind of just follow what's happening, and somehow I've been directed to go the path that I went. And I sit here today and truly say that this is exactly what I was supposed to do in life. Was supposed to come up in the rankings, go through all the toughness and the heartaches and so on to get to becoming a world champion, to get to K1, to get to where I am sitting today. And because by the time I realized, retirement was creeping up, I knew I wanted to stay within the industry. And the only way that I was going to do that was to start my own fight league. And that's exactly what we did. And so, and that's where we are today with PFL. And again, I truly am thankful and blessed and grateful. And of course, all thanks to the Heavenly Father.
Hey, Ray, name's Johnny. I had a quick question.
Hey, Johnny.
Which one would you say is more difficult? Prepping, I understand there's just two different dynamics as far as being an athlete, competing as well, different pressures, and then starting your own fight league. It seems like it's just two different types of difficult. I can't even imagine doing both. But which one do you think was throughout the years, as you're going through your experience, is more difficult? Prepping for a fight with pressure on the line, or running an entire fight league?
I think the preparing for a fight, there's definitely a lot more. There's so much pressure that you got to deal with, because not only you got to be on weight, you got to be disciplined, you got to be motivated. There's so many things to it. And then you got to show up and still do the business. You know what I mean? And where, fortunately for the league, I have an amazing team that at PFL, that everybody works together. And even though there is pressures here and there, but if I had to pick one or the other, 100%, the league is a lot easier to deal with in terms of, and maybe because of all the experiences that I've gained from being an athlete, that I understand fully what these athletes go through. And so there are times where I can actually offer advice for guys that hadn't been through certain difficulties throughout their careers. And so, because I used, I would always say, there's nothing in the game that I haven't seen. And then I get to go to Brazil when I was coaching Vitor Belfort at the time, and he was the main event there, and he's fighting at 3:00 in the morning in Rio, and of course that was to accommodate for the time back here in the U.S. But there was like 20,000 people in this arena, and I couldn't even hear Joe Rogan do the interview because the atmosphere was just electrifying. It was just amazing. You know what I mean? So, again, that's another experience that I've never experienced anywhere else. At 3:00 in the morning, and you got 20,000 fans in the stadium going crazy.
I was going to say that's amazing because that's got to be something that's carried over in the fighters that come to work for you or work with you in your promotion, is the fact that they're really talking to somebody who's been there and done it. You've, I'm sure, been on the good side of the deal and the bad side of the deal, or like the recipient of the bad part as well. And it's amazing to think that, you've got fighters that are talking and dealing with the fighter. And like that's got to resonate with the fighters on your roster, I'd imagine, because I remember there was a brief time in like the mid 2000s, and I'm not trying to throw shade at any other promoters or or organizations, but I do remember when it was this funny story that they were really trying to push that Dana White is a guy who would actually get in there and slug it out with his fighters over a bad deal or something, and like because they were trying to sell that boxing match with him and Tito Ortiz when he was having issues with them. And that's no shade to Dana. He's dealing with his own things, and I'm not trying to touch on any of that right now. But I'm just like, the funny thing is, like, that was the lore, that was the story. But for you, it wasn't just a story. Like, I mean, even fast forwarding later on and toward the end of your career, you were literally the president of the promotion, fighting on the promotion, and I'm like, that was just such a cool thing,
Yeah, no, I agree. I the team thought it was. The team thought I was crazy, but I thought, well, why not? Right? I mean, it's just, again, I thank the good Lord that I'm able to do the things that I do in life, and to be able to compete in your own promotion, well, for me, it was incredible. But it's also, throughout this past 10 years, since we started WSOF, 5 years later, and it became PFL. It's so humbling to be able to deal with managers and fighters, and they say it's amazing that we can actually just talk to you and you fully understand what every single fighter goes through from the very beginning to the highest level of being a world champion or whatnot. So again, I'm just blessed and so thankful and so grateful for where I am and being able to be able, to advise some of these guys. And there are fighters that come to me and say, hey, listen, Ray, I don't have a manager, so I'm going to be looking after myself. I'm like, listen, I'm always going to be transparent with you. I fully understand where you're at. And so, when the time comes that you feel that you need a manager, obviously, I always tell guys it's also good to have a manager because there's so much things that a manager can do for a fighter. Because once you're in such, whether you're in the UFC or PFL or Bellator, so much pressure being a fighter, and there's so much that you got to do. You got to train jiu-jitsu, you got to train wrestling, you got to train kickboxing, all the grappling and everything else that it takes to be a mixed martial artist. And so it's important that some of these guys have managers. And I tell them all the time, listen, until that time happens, I'm always going to be straight up. I'm going to tell you exactly what works for you guys and what works for the company. And as long as we're both working together, then we're both growing together.
So, Ray, as a Pacific Islander, were there any obstacles that you faced in the kickboxing and MMA world because of your ethnicity? And if you do have any, how did you overcome those?
No, I if anything, it was all positive, if you will, benefits, as you know, and we know, every Samoan fighter that's been out there has been a force within the industry, whether it be Jimmy Thunder, David Tua, Marseille, Joseph Parker, Mark Hunt, and the list goes on. And so I think being Polynesian is being a blessing, because we bring that kind of, I always say, if there's a will, there's a way, right? And so we always bring that mana to the table every single time, whether it's training or the match itself. That just flows through our blood, and it's just the way it is. And so, no, I've been very blessed and so thankful that all that's been a blessing, and it's been positive.
Yeah, and I brought that question up because many people tend to bring up their background when it comes to things like this. But I'm a firm believer that, hard work, it pays off. So amidst all your success and fame, how did you manage to stay grounded and true to yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe in the Heavenly Father. God has always been part of my life. 2, I've always had the attitude that I was not better than anybody else. Just because I was a 6-time world champion doesn't make me better than the next person. You know what I mean? We're all blessed in so many different ways. We all being blessed in a certain type of talent. But it's up to us to kind of discover what that talent is. And so everyone is fighting to get to the top. Everybody's fighting to succeed. Everybody's fighting to put food on the table for their families and whatnot. So, and I just looked at it. I just looked at it in the way that I was just very thankful and grateful that I was blessed with a talent that allowed me to travel the world, that allowed me to meet people, and allowed me to talk to you guys. It allowed me to, just those kind of blessings. And for me, it was just, I watched, I think it was about a year or 2 ago, I seen this interview that was done by, it wasn't an interview, it was a graduation, and Denzel Washington was the speaker that day. And, he said things like, first believe in God, because throughout his life, he knew he had been directed, he had been protected, and he had been corrected. And when he said that and I heard that, I was like, man, I can so much relate to what he just said. You know what I mean? And so, and I think that's what keeps me grounded, is my faith in the man upstairs and in the Heavenly Father. And of course, my faith in myself, what I'm capable of doing and how I can help people. And then, there's a saying, and I heard this saying from Ray Lewis, probably 3-4 years ago: show me your friends and I'll show you your future. So then you got to find the right people to surround yourself with to continue to grow as a human being, but also a person that has humility and understanding that we're all the same, just that we're different because we do different things in life. And so that's my long, short answer to that.
So one thing that I think is amazing about you is that when it comes to talking about you and your legacy, it goes beyond just you being a fighter. We've mentioned a few times here, it's you as a promoter. And what I mean about that is that you see in the world of combat sports, that it's very rare when you see fighters have a happy ending, in the sense that we've seen too many fighters where they can't let go. It's too hard for them to find their way out or to decide on when it's time to get out, and then or to even find an exit plan. Because often, like, a fighter is like, they don't want to let go because, unfortunately, there's some fighters who have nothing else. They're like, what do I do if I'm not fighting? Commonly, you'll see them turn into trainers and continue to pass that knowledge on, and they'll have success in that. And then what I love about what you've done is that your exit strategy and your time as a fighter overlapped by quite a bit. You kind of were just doing both at the same time towards the end, and you as a trainer as well. And I think there's a lot to be said and to be learned from, because by the time you were done fighting, when you did finally decide, maybe it's time to hang him up, it's not like you had to suddenly become a promoter or suddenly become a trainer. You're already doing those things. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. In regards to that, is there any advice that you would want to give any young fighters or anything concerning setting themselves up for success on the way outside of the sport?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, absolutely. Nowadays, that old stigma when I first started martial arts about fighters, if you will, and it was more on the boxing side of things. But as I was coming up in the rankings, I have a lot of friends that were in the boxing world who are very smart people in martial arts and mixed martial arts. And there's so many of martial artists that are very intelligent people. But sometimes I think they got to be reminded that they are smart enough to walk away from the game when they're ready to walk away and do something else, whether it be like what I'm doing. And also, like you said, there's a lot of fighters who become coaches and whatnot. But I about a year, maybe a year and a half, could have been 2 years into me understanding that sooner or later I'm going to walk away from competing. And so, as you know, you can't compete for the rest of your life. Sometimes I wish you could, but that's not reality. And so already I was, writing things down, making plans. For example, how the league is today. We're the only MMA league in the sport where there's a regular season, playoffs, and championship. And so all these things I've written down and make notes of it a year prior to me actually putting it into action. And there's also the format that I wanted to start Words is a Fighting with, hence the reason why the name is Words is a Fighting. People have asked me, well, how did you come up with that name? And I said, well, one of my friends was actually talking about gambling. And then one night I'm watching TV and Words is a Poker was on. And I was like, Words is a Poker, Words is a Fight. That's what the name is going to be because of the tournament format. It was going to be the whole world. I mean, exactly what's happening with PFL today. And so I had already understood and accepted that at some point in the next couple of years, me as a fighter was going to come to an end. And so whatever my exit strategy was, I had to try and figure out what that was. I want to say 6 months after this was said and done, that I had put it, written it down and whatnot, I actually realized that I wanted to stay within the industry because it's like I've gotten my master's after I won 6 world titles. It was like I'd gotten my master's in martial arts. And then in 2010, I got inducted into the martial arts Masters Hall of Fame. And when I got inducted there, when I got that phone call, I was like, is this a joke? Because, when you're a young kid growing up in New Zealand, you never think about being a Hall of Famer. And then when that presented itself, I was like, okay, this is just a prank, and it wasn't. And and so in 2010, I was inducted into the Martial Arts Masters Hall of Fame. 2011, I was inducted into the USA Martial Arts Hall of Fame. And 2016, myself and also Hoosh, Bronco Sigatik, and a few others were inducted into the International Martial Arts Hall of Fame. So all these things kind of all have come from the hard work that was put in being a competitor. So I just knew this is where I wanted to be. I just knew that I wanted to stay within the industry because not only that there was room for another mixed martial arts show, but there was also a lot of fighters and people that I knew that also, didn't have a place to go. And so, and that's how that came to be. And in my first press conference, the reporter said, well, Ray, so are you going to be a competitor to the UFC? I'm like, that's actually a silly question because the way I look at it, literally, we hadn't had a show yet. The UFC at that time was 20 plus years old, if you will. And so I said, listen, it doesn't make any sense because my thought process at the time and even today is that the challenge challenges with me and myself, because when we continue to challenge ourselves, we're going to continue to learn from the mistakes that we are making, and then we're going to continue to grow. And that's where the challenge is at. And, and then the other question was, well, why the backyard of the UFC? I said, how many McDonald's do you see in Las Vegas? And that was the end of that.
That's great. And I even have to speak to that too, because MMA is like my main sport that I'll follow. And there's something I get frustrated with is that I feel like MMA has the most fickle fandom. And maybe I'm speaking out of line there because I'm just not familiar with a lot of other fandoms, but there's a lot of weirdos out there that think that the greatest fighters in the world all have to wear a specific sequence of 3 letters on their shorts or something, because I'm like, this is silly. And I remembered it was just a fun time when we had WSOF, UFC, Bellator were all kind of at the top. And I would just get online and I'd see the forums and they'd be saying like, oh, this Justin Gaethje guy is cool fighting over WSOF, but he couldn't hang with the top 15 guys. He wouldn't even break top 15 in the UFC.
Right.
Then what happens? Goes over to the UFC and he starts smirking everybody, and he's been ranked in the top 5 for how long?
Right.
Like the guy is just on fire. Michael Chandler at the same time was rocking it in Bellator, came over, and he's like one of the biggest draws. Eddie Alvarez came from Bellator and became a champion. I'm like, and people start paying attention. I'm like, look, do you think they're good just because now they're in the UFC? They were that good before. You just weren't watching them, and so it's great that you create these other platforms, because the UFC roster can only be so big. You can only put on so many shows a year. So where do these other fighters that are just as good, but they didn't have the right edge to them to like cut the right promos, so the UFC passed on them? I mean, even in the PFL right now, I'm blanking on the fighter's name, but there was a guy who fought on Dana's Contender Series, and he put on this awesome fight, but because he went for a takedown at the end, Dana was like, we don't want him in the UFC. But then he goes to PFL, the guy wins $1 million because he wins the whole tournament. I'm like, you know what? Getting cut from the Contender Series is the best thing that could have happened to that man's career. Like, he's made more money than some of the champions right now. Who was that?
Right. Yeah. Brendan Loughnane.
Right. And so and that's my main point is that there's so much talent out there, and to have more avenues for those talent to be noticed and realize their dreams, how could that not be a good thing? And concerning the PFL, it's just amazing what you do. You said you have an actual, you run it like an actual league. There's an actual season format that you run it on. I love that you get live stats like for every punch thrown, etc. I wanted to ask you, though, about something because once again, consulting my fickle fandom online with fellow MMA fans who want to talk trash about every little thing, I see one criticism that the PFL gets, and it's a very unfair criticism because I know it's something that you can't control or account for. But in the last few seasons, it feels like you've been unfortunately plagued by some crummy decisions thrown up by judges. Now, the thing is, it's not kind of a fair criticism of you, but I see a lot of people complain about this in the PFL specifically, like, oh, poor Clay Collard once again doesn't get to advance appropriately because of these bad decisions. But that's up to the athletic commissions. I know that you don't get to pick or appoint these judges. So I just have to ask, though, what steps can you take as a promotion and as a promoter to address these things that are in large parts out of your control?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question. I mean, that's, a really good question. And it's funny you said it, because there are times where I've had to like copy and paste, and just literally reply to these people that, number one, we as the league, just as like the UFC, Bellator, and every other promotion in the US, we have to put in a request through the commission, the times and dates that we want to do a show, and if is any of those dates available for the commission to approve us. And then first and foremost, you got to have the funds to be able to do a show before the commission even approves you. And so when that is all said and done, then the commission appoints the referees, the judges, and so on and so on. And this is what I try to explain to a lot of people is that, when it comes to the judging, and we also have to get approval from the commission for us to actually have a show. And then when it comes to judging and whatnot, that's all, commission, and that's, it's a government unit, if you will. Yeah, I mean, we've advised certain commissions in terms of, should I say, that we've actually voiced our opinion on certain referees and certain judges from time to time, because we've seen many a times there's been some bad decisions and bad refereeing, and those opinions is merely to say that these judges and referees need more training. And so this past 5 years, we see a lot of referees come to Extreme Couture, and throughout sparring nights, then they get to ref the actual sparring in the cage, which they're gaining experience and whatnot. So yeah, listen, it's not perfect, but I'm pretty sure that the commissioners are doing making sure that these guys do get more training and whatnot. But yeah, that's the thing. When it comes to my side of things, the only thing I can do is to voice an opinion, an humble opinion, on where they can continue to improve and whatnot.
Yeah, you guys heard the man. It's out of his control. So, Ray, I want to touch on a topic. Not a lot of people know this, but you were an actor. You cameoed in some movies, right? You were in the 1995 Hercules, the legendary Journeys, the 2004 Godzilla Final Wars, the 2008 Bad Guys. Could you touch on that briefly, please?
Yeah, I wouldn't say acting. I wouldn't say actor, but the Final Wars was actually terrible. But in saying that, I really enjoyed Bad Guys because I was able to get an acting coach for a very small part. There was going to be a sequel to that. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. I've heard one manager say that every actor wants to be a fighter and every fighter wants to be an actor. But no, I've done very, very small parts here and there. I don't call myself an actor. I'll say this: I try.
You dabble a little bit, huh?
Exactly. But myself and another good friend of mine, we've had a production company for the last 10 years, and a few things is in the works right now. So hopefully in a couple of years we'll start filming and whatnot. But yeah, there's some things in the works right now.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
So I just want to ask, and sorry, I should have asked this a bit earlier, but I want to go back a little bit just to pick your brain a little bit. But actually, kind of on point with the Godzilla movie, did that come along because of your affiliation with fighting in Japan so often? Because I wanted you to just reflect on your time as a fighter in Japan, because I've heard a lot of fighters talk about it like it was a whole different experience. Being a fighter in Japan is a much different experience, not just for the crowd attendance, but even just the way they do business. What was that like for you, that moment in time?
Yeah, it will be some of the most memorable moments in my life, or time in my life, if you will. I was contracted K1 for about 13 years. And, it was such an amazing experience because, of course, the fans, the Japanese people are just amazing. They were, I would have to say, they're probably some of the best fans in the world, because for them, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about that honor and respect and the samurai spirit, the mana that you bring to the table every time. And so for them, they're just diehard fans. I mean, the most people I've competed in front of was in Tokyo Dome in front of 80,000 people. And it's just an amazing feeling. But at the same time, it's like you come out and there's this, yeah, Sefo's on. And then there's this, once the bell rings for the fight, like you could hear a pin drop in there. It's just so quiet. And then when there's action, yeah, and it's just so respectful. And I mean, I love Japan. I love the Japanese people. The fans were truly amazing. But yeah, those years are definitely highlights of my life for sure.
So, Ray, we're all fathers here, and I know what's important to you is your family.
Minus me.
Yeah. So, how do you manage to kind of separate your professional life from your family time? Because you're a very busy man. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I make sure that there's family time within that schedule, because my kids are the most amazing thing. Like, I remember one reporter asked, "What's, in your whole career and your life, what's one thing that kind of stands out for you?" My kids is what stands out for me. I will give up everything that I've achieved throughout life in the heartbeat for my kids. They, I thank the good Lord every day that I've been blessed with two amazing kids. I have a boy and a girl, Ramon and Adriana, and they're just, I never understood, like I thought I knew what love was, and I'm sure you guys understand this. You thought you knew what love was until you held that little one in your hands, and it comes to a point when they look at you and they know, and they smile at you, and you just go, wow, and you just melt, and so it's such an amazing experience of life to understand that true love, but also to understand as a parent, you got to guide these lives to become good people in society and to grow up to be people that can be there to help others. You know what I mean? I heard a saying a long time ago. I truly 100% agree that, if you wake up and you're just doing what you do, you're just existing. But the way to live life and to grow is by helping others. And so, I do things that shows my kids that for us, it's not just us. It's about helping somebody else. It's about giving back. It's about making sure that you can make this person's day and allow for them to smile for the day and whatnot. And so my advice is like, listen, life is hard at times, but it's not meant to be easy. But that's what allows us to grow as human beings and allow us to understand one of the main purpose we're here is to help each other, to continue to grow as people. But so I try to keep it really basic for my kids, but at the same time, do things that allow them to see that it's about giving back. It's about helping others. And I remember one day we were in a restaurant, and my son, my family and I were having dinner, and my son spotted an older gentleman having dinner by himself. And my son's 13 now, but he was 12 when he said this to me. And he goes, "Dad, can we buy that man over there's dinner?" I'm like, 100%. So we bought his dinner, and the waiter was like, I'll let him know. I said, no, don't say anything. Just say somebody else, but, you don't need to say who bought him dinner. But like to hear that from my son was true, I was proud, but also humbling because, he's actually learning from some of the things that we do, you know what I mean? And so it's great.
Yeah, that's amazing because we try to leave a legacy for our kids to follow. And you're right, we live and learn, and then we adapt and try to better ourselves. Especially for me, we're all podcasters, and we've now entered, the business realm where we're trying to be entrepreneurs, selling merch and stuff. But my next question for you is, as a man, can you talk about any personal experiences or lesson that you've learned about mental health or your physical well-being?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate and blessed. And again, I'm so grateful. And I thank the good Lord every day that I've been blessed with a strong mind and a strong body. And, everything that I do in my life is trying to set examples and trying to grow, continue to grow as a human being and try to set examples for others. But, I've dealt with, but I've had, I want to say, let me see, about 4 people in my life that have actually taken their lives through certain difficulties in life and whatnot. And it's sad, but, and I'll use an example. I'm not going to name the gentleman, but he reached out to me, and the text I got from him, he was going through a difficult time in his life. And the text was pretty much crying for help. I woke up a Saturday morning, I read this text, I called him right away and I said, brother, listen, I'll pick you up in an hour and we'll go from there. Thank God he's still here today and he's loving life and seeing, well, I've seen him grow as a person and as a human being and whatnot. But sometimes these guys got to understand that it just takes one person to talk to, right? And I've heard many people say this also. Don't forget to call your family, your friends and whatnot. Just, touching base and making sure that they know that you're there, right? And so a couple of friends of mine from here, I'm sure, this throughout the mixed martial arts world, 2 of our guys from our gym was in that situation. And so I just wish that they had reached out and talk to me about it or talk to anybody about it for that matter, right? And so to our brothers and sisters out there, understand that, life continues to throw curveballs at us. And life is not meant to be easy. And you're not meant to go through it by yourself either. So just know that reach out to somebody, talk to someone, because there's a lot of helplines out there as well. But there's also a lot of friends and family that all they need is for you to talk to them and open up, and they're there to help and they're there to give you support and love and make you realize and understand that you are important and you are meant to be here.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I know that a lot of us go through these things, especially with men and mental health. I'm very open with depression and thoughts of suicide on this podcast, and that's one of the topics that we like to stress on, that especially to our listeners, that there is help out there. And if you're not comfortable with talking to friends, family, there's always the helpline. I believe the helpline is 988 for suicide prevention hotline. And I want to touch on this because I want to hear, do you have a personal or professional mantra or quote that you live by every day?
Not really, because like I teach my kids, the first thing I do when I wake up is to thank the good Lord. And I go back to, what Denzel Washington was saying. Put God first. And that's what I've done in my life. Like throughout my life, God has always been first in my life. And so I teach my kids that once they wake up, the prayer is really simple. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for allowing me to wake up to another day of life. We ask for your continuous blessings and protection throughout the day. And that's what I teach my kids. And then before they go to bed, they got to say, thank you, Heavenly Father, for the amazing day that we've had. We thank you. We thank you. We love you. Amen. Right? It's so I don't have say per se, but God is faith is is everything, right? And God is in my life from the time I open my eyes to the time I go to bed. And so, and I'll share this as well. And I've done this throughout my whole career, like even as a fighter, because I understand and I know how tough it is to be a fighter, and I know that lifestyle is tough with training and you got to put in 2-3 sessions a day. After every session, when I'm driving home, I'm thanking the good Lord for giving me the energy to be able to do what I do every day. And those prayers happen 4, 5, 6 times a day, because and that's what keeps me grounded. Also is just understanding that He's there with me day in, day out. My advice is to those, find God and let God be first in your life. And if you don't believe in God, then find the higher power, because I'm sure we all believe in some sort of higher power. And you might not understand that higher power, but that's God. Let God be first in your life, and you'll continue to grow. And that's my advice to that.
Thank you so much for sharing that and reminding us there's a lot more to life than work, fighting,
Right.
hobbies, etc. There's a lot deeper, more important things. I have a few more MMA geek questions that I need to ask you before we let you go. But before I do that, I just wanted to see if anybody, before I start dipping us back into that, anybody else in particular want to go on any other specific subject?
Yes. So Ray, in American Samoa, I've looked it up, and there's not a lot of MMA, kickboxing, especially martial arts club in American Samoa. There's boxing, there's wrestling, but I haven't heard of a MMA club in American Samoa. Is that something that you would take in consideration? Because there was a incident, kids, high school kids fighting at the markets, the makeki, and it popped the question. These kids have no outlets of bringing out their fighting spirits. Instead of fighting each other at the markets, why aren't there programs on the island to help these kids manage and take out their anger on something more productive and useful, like fighting? Is that, I know you've done stuff for Samoa, but do you have anything, I'm not sure if you understand what I'm trying to say.
No, I think
Any programs?
Yeah, I think I do. I don't have anything planned at this present time, but I do know that there were a few people, some other Samoan coaches from Hawaii and places like that. I think one other from California. I believe that they were looking to open schools out there in terms of mixed martial arts and whatnot. I don't know that's still in the works or it's in place already. But yeah, I'll look into it and find out and see what I can do to help, and we'll go from there.
Yes, thank you.
Hey, Mr. Ray, I gotta add the Mister in there because I'm starstruck right now. Before the ages of smartphones, when we had the flip phones and the Nokias, the brick phones, and the beginning of the internet, I knew you before I seen you because the Samoan communities, churches, especially when we go to activities,
right.
You always got the uncles with the boxing gloves, or something, and sports idols when it came to the Samoan community at that time: football, Junior Seau, Troy Polamalu. And then when it came to combat sports, it was you, Mark Hunt, David Tua, Mighty Mo, not so much because we saw him up and close and personal at church basketball. Some of his greatest hits over there, but definitely you. So I was excited, and I let people on my social media know that we had you coming on, and I asked them because they're the ones who, got me to follow you. I was like, are there any questions you want me to ask? The great one. And to keep time short, I'll just ask this one from the brother Mark Fitu. Are there any, because you're always scouting for talent, watching, you're on the watch. Are there any up and coming Polynesian fighters that we should be on the lookout for?
It's funny you said that because there was a Polynesian fighter that I just seen it today, actually. It reached out to me. I don't know exactly what its experience is. Obviously, I'm going to reach out to him and find out what that is. But there's a couple of guys that I've actually brought on board. I think it was our last WSOF show. And just like any typical Polynesian fighter, you see so much heart and you see skills, but we seem to lack that stamina side of things. And I've seen, this is the reason why also throughout my career, I was always disciplined enough to be dedicated to training and making sure that every time I stepped into that ring or cage that I was going to be ready. And if I was going to lose a fight, it wasn't because I was too tired to fight. It was because the other fighter might have been lucky or might have been a better fighter on the night. But there are certain people that I've actually given opportunities to and haven't showed up to their full potential, if you will. Now, I've been talking to a couple of coaches from back home in New Zealand and Australia, and there's some young Polynesian fighters that I've had 2-0 now in their records and whatnot. So I'm keeping an eye on these guys and see what's next. Obviously, we had a female fighter, Jenna Fabian, who fought in the league a couple of years, and so we also want to be able to get to a point where I'm able to bring shows down under. And so there's a couple of friends of mine also down there scouting for some Polynesian talent down there and whatnot. But yeah, there's definitely a few young ones, but they're early in their career. And so I'll keep my eye out and we'll go from there.
One more thing. For me, we always have that person that we look up to. I know a lot of people look up to you, Ray, but who was that person, whether it be a parent, a trainer, another fighter? Who was that person that you've always looked up to, a kind of your role model?
I never allowed myself to look up at anybody because I admired a lot of talent and I admired a lot of greats, but I never allowed myself to look up at them as something that was untouchable, because there's nothing else that in my life that I look up to other than God himself. And so he's always been my guidance in so many ways. I don't want to make this sound like it's make it like a religious thing, because everybody's have their own personal relationship with God. You know what I mean? And so, but I also never allowed myself to look up at anybody because I didn't want to be the guy that was down here and they were up here. I'd always wanted to be leveled with them. And my saying was always in life was, if he can do it, I can do it. And so, and that was my way of looking at it. If Bruce Lee can do it, I can do it. If Jackie Chan can do it, I can do it. If Peter Harris can do it, I can do it. If Vanessa Hoosh can do it, I can do it. That was my mindset about it. You know what I mean? If Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, can do it, I can do it. So that was always the way I looked at. Now, like I said, I've admired all these great fighters and whatnot, but I've never allowed myself to look up at anybody. I've always been like, okay, if he can do it, I can do it. And then when I level up, that's where we're at. And, and I've taken all the lessons from throughout their lives and all the good things. And obviously you throw away the bad, but I try and learn from everybody. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense.
I know Michael had asked, what was your most memorable punch? Me personally, I am not an MMA guy, and I'm not martial arts. I Googled you. I don't know. So these guys are all fanboying out, and I'm just loving what you're saying, because I'm really interested in anything. Just hearing about people's lifestyles and perspectives is a huge thing for me, because I'm in my own little bubble here. I live in Utah, and I only worry about me. But to have that perspective, as you said, you fought in front of 50,000 people. I can't even imagine that. Yeah. Let alone, fighting in a parking lot with a couple spectators, taking a video after a drunken at the bar, whatever. But 50,000 people in a controlled setting is pretty crazy. So what was, like, to me, and this is a pretty generic question, what was or actually two, what was the punch that you received that you remember, punch, kick, or the hit that really rang your bell? And two, since you've been all over the world, what was the coolest place you've ever been to?
Let me ask the first question. It's always the one that you don't see, that you don't remember. And thank God that I think 110 pro fights and 4 amateurs, I was stopped in 3 fights, I think. And so, like I said, it's the one that you don't see, that you don't remember. Now, in terms of the places that I've been, I've traveled the world, but one of the coolest places that stands out the most for me was Rome, in Italy. when I was living in Germany at the time, because I lived in Germany from 93 for just before 93, actually, for about a year, a little over a year. But anyway, in Rome, I got to like, because I studied social studies and the history of what Rome is at school. And so to be in the Colosseum and standing there and just like visualizing like all these battles that happened in there, crazy, let alone the spot where they filmed Bruce Lee and what was the name of the film? It was Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee's fight scene. And that was filmed at the Colosseum as well. So yeah, no, Rome stands out a lot because there's so much history there. And even to this day, there are buildings that still stand to this day from 100 years ago and or more. And yeah, so, but I mean, there's so many beautiful places around the world, but that one particularly stands out for me for so many reasons. Yeah, so it'd have to be Rome, I would say.
Thanks. That's pretty neat.
So I'd be remiss to not ask you about this because PFL seems to make bigger and bigger moves every year. I need to ask about your recent partnership or signing with Jake Paul, because Jake Paul, like he starts out and he's doing his like celebrity boxing thing, and me, like a lot of other fans, were probably thinking, "Oh, this is corny," but lo and behold, this guy's got some hands. Like, I mean, I'll give him props, man. He's, I know he'd whoop me. So, but not just that, but the guy's a legitimate draw. And he was saying for a while, I'm going to come to MMA. I'm telling the MMA guys to come to the boxing world. Well, now I'm going to go to the MMA world. And he finally did it, at least on paper. We've seen the announcement that Jake Paul's going to be working with you guys. Now, is that kind of like a promotional partnership? Because I know that he's always kind of maintained a lot of tight control over the events he's put on, where he's going to have some stronger say in his matches. Are these going to be kind of like special exhibition matches? Because I obviously don't imagine him going into a regular season lineup. But I know he's tried to call out Nate Diaz. Hey, come give me one boxing fight and I'll give you an MMA fight, rematch, etc. Would you like to speak on that a bit?
Yeah, so Jake Paul, our team has been talking to him for the last 6 months and whatnot. But we're obviously really happy to be partners with him for our pay-per-view division, but also as their competitor. He's definitely going to fight MMA. He's doing he's training MMA as we speak, but we probably won't see him there until I don't want to speak for him, but I want to say either late this year, at the end of this year, or early next year, or but definitely he's definitely serious about fighting in MMA. And he's seen, obviously, he's watched a lot of the things that PFL do, and he loves the fact that we're fighters first. And also earlier, 2022, our chairman had an interview announced that we were paying 50% of the revenue at our pay-per-view division to the fighters. And so there's no secret that he's been loud about fighter pay and whatnot. And so he just likes what we stand for and what we're doing. And so yeah, he came on board as a partner as well as a competitor. So we wish him nothing but the best. And when the first match was set up with Ben Askren, I actually had him finishing Ben Askren in 3 rounds. He finished it in the first round. And mainly because Ben Askren is a great MMA champion due to his wrestling, but I don't think Ben had ever won a striking match in a striking round within those matches, where Jake Paul had been training boxing for like 3 years or so. And then I think he had a few exhibition bouts prior to this fight. And so I just felt like he had, even though in terms of combat, Ben was the one with all the credentials, if you will, but this was just a straight boxing fight. And MMA and boxing are completely 2 different sports, obviously. I'm not stating the obvious, but Jake Paul was definitely definitely had a lot more experience in that world than Ben did. And so, I mean, the outcome wasn't surprising at all. But yeah, no, it's really great to have him as a partner. And I think, I believe he's getting ready for something right now. I'm not sure exactly when, but yeah, no, I wish him nothing but the best in that next fight.
Another thing I need to ask about is recent development just happened a few days ago. We just learned, or I think yesterday they officially announced it, where Francis Ngannou, the UFC heavyweight champion, has been released from the UFC.
Right.
He's been trying to come to terms with them. Of course, I don't know the intricacies of the UFC side of things or Francis's side of things, but the point is, the man that the UFC spent so much time building up as the baddest man on the planet is now no longer fighting for the UFC.
Right.
I've got to ask you, what I know this is all fresh and new, but what do you think the chances are of you possibly signing Francis Ngannou, or your relative interest in it? I know that he's graced Extreme Couture in the past, and I'm sure you've got some acquaintances there. Just would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Francis is a friend, he's a good friend, and he's a teammate. And 100% now that, he's a free agent, we're definitely interested. But I'm pretty sure Francis is back home now. He's been back home for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And so there will definitely be a time that I'm sure that we'll get to talk to him as well as everybody else, if you will. But yeah, I don't know exactly what he's thinking and what is on his mind, because I heard, like I said, he left for home 2 weeks ago. But when that time comes, we will definitely talk to him.
All right. Well, thank you very much for elaborating on that. Let's see. I just wanted to put it out to the rest of the cast. Any other subjects y'all wanted to touch on?
No, but I do like shout outs. Is there anyone that you want to shout out in your life, your family, friends, partners?
Yeah, other than obviously a big shout out to my family, my kids, Ramon, Adriana, my teammates, our gym at Extreme Couture, PFL, of course, my team at PFL, and I think that's it. I don't really do shout outs, but yeah, I might as well, shout out some of the people that's in my life every day.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time. You've been so gracious, sharing these experiences with us. You really uplifted us, and I hope our listeners as well. Before we close things out, I'd like to humbly apologize to my castmates. I am so sorry, because I realized that I was so eager to jump into this interview. I introduced myself, I introduced our guests, and I completely disrespected my friends here. We were, of course, joined by Johnny, T, Michael, and I wanted to give a special shout out to Ati, who can't be with us. Congratulations on your newborn. Congratulations and love to your family. And so my bad on that, everybody. But thank you, Uncle Ray Sefo. We appreciate you sharing your time and experience with us. We look forward to everything you're doing in the PFL and in life. And so thank you again, everybody, for rocking with us. We look forward to having a fun and productive schedule in 2023. Once again, this was Behind the Lava Lava. You can find us on all social media platforms. Brought to you by Matai Watches. Thank you, and so far.
Thanks, guys.